Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your hosts, Tim and Des.
Okay, welcome to this week's Momentum. So good to have you tuning in wherever you are all around Australia. And hey, if you're listening to the podcast wherever you are all around the world as well, it's really great for you to come and spend some time with Des and I. And let's introduce the Irishman, the legend himself, Des Kennedy. How are you?
I've told you before, legends are dead people. And I know I'm getting close, but I'm not quite
close
there yet. But thank you for the words of encouragement.
You've already achieved legendary status while you're alive, Des. Look at that.
I'll accept that. That's all good. Yeah, infamous. It's amazing that we get to do this show and speak into the lives of men. We love helping men. It's our passion. It's what we do. It's our calling. And so it's really great to be able to do that. And, we've got so many tools that we use that will help you on your journey. And one of the key ones is our website, momentumaustralia.org. And there's lots of information on there, all our previous podcasts on every subject. And by the way, you can search by speaker or you can search by topic or by date. Either way, you can search and find a podcast that will help you in any given situation. So that's really good. But also don't forget our care line, 1-800-000-MEN, that's 636. Guys, if you're doing life on your own, you want to have a safe and confidential conversation, you can't find somebody in your world that you feel safe with, reach out to our care line. It operates from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. And also, we've started our YouTube channel, which is Momentum for Men on YouTube, and lots of videos on there. So you get to look at me as well as hear me. How good is that?
Oh, it's really just delightful, Days.
Delightful is the word.
Absolutely wonderful. It is. But there's only a few up there because it takes us a little while. By the time we make Des and I look half decent through lots of photoshopping and all that stuff, it takes a while, I'm joking. But YouTube channel, get in there, have a look, sign up, click, like, all that sort of stuff, follow. We are here for you to help you on your journey. A key part of why Des and I first started Momentum, actually, while we're on that subject a few years ago, was that we could see, particularly in the circles that we were moving in, that many men were struggling with a variety of different things in their lives.
Yeah, it's true. With decades of, feminism, women's rights, equal rights, and the rise of the Me Too movement and toxic masculinity, now have taken their toll. There's so many men that I speak to, and they're confused about what a healthy masculinity looks like. What does it mean to be a good man? What does it mean to be a healthy man? And how do we express that?
Yeah. And naturally, of course, this is going to have a flow-on effect as to how we show up, not just in life, but as dads. And that's what we're going to talk about on this week's show, Compassionate Dads. Once again, we've got author, educator, award-winning speaker Michelle Mitchell back with us. Welcome back to Momentum, Michelle.
I'm very excited to be here.
Well, you dropped some mics in the first show and had some light glow moments with us, and encourage you to go and have a listen back to that. That was our episode on handling feedback with maturity. You can check that out at the website, momentumaustralia.org. And of course, Michelle's website is michellemitchell.org. We're expecting that there's no pressure as we start the show, expecting that you're going to speak into this.
I feel like I'm just chatting with two blokes.
And you 100% are. And first up, can we just say straight off the bat, it may seem strange to have a female joining us for this particular conversation, but a heads up for those that don't know, you have 3 boys and a husband, so technically 4 kids in your house.
No, 2 boys, 1 husband.
Only 2 left. Only 2.
Yeah.
24, 22, and a husband.
All right.
Yeah.
I call them my 3 boys.
Yeah.
There you go. So you're well qualified to speak into this space. Let's get into the show. I mean, do you think the intro is accurate? Do you think that men are confused about manhood and a healthy expression of manhood? I mean, from your experience and your work with, teenage boys and just being around your husband, do you think that guys are struggling?
Everywhere I go, it's a conversation that young men are having. They don't want to be called a misogynist. They don't want to be called a rapist. They don't want to be called a terrorist. And they seem to be really pushing back against stereotypes. And they are really looking for role models. And I think they have been void of role models for several generations as well. And they're really looking to stand up and have their voice. And I think regardless of gender. I think everyone deserves to be able to stand up and have their voice. And I think this generation have really got some social media figures as well who are standing up with a very strong voice, from Joe Rogan all the way through. You can, from all sides of different figures who are really standing up and really having a voice on all sorts of issues. And it's creating debate and it's creating conversation. And because I have a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old who I guess have social media feeds that are very curated to their age group, they're constantly sending me stuff that is coming through their social media feeds. And we are talking around these issues. And it's very, very interesting, their thoughts around it. And I love it. I love it.
That what you've just hit on is an absolutely key point in dealing as a father with children. And that is, be across everything they're doing, being across their social media, being involved and having conversations, about those. Because, being a compassionate dad is exactly that, isn't it? It's being involved, being active in pursuing the relationship with your children, to give them that role model, to give them that somebody they can look up to and be coached by.
And there's nothing like a teenager to want to critique the generation above them and the generation that has been. So they're really in that age where they love to pick it apart and they love to critique it. And I love to have debates with my young adult boys. And I think they do like a teenage perspective as well. And I think they want to see it through a female's eyes. And yeah, so it's a really interesting time to be parenting, and it's a really interesting time to be talking around these issues.
Yeah.
So when your kids come to you, and then when you and your husband talk, are there common themes that you would say there's probably a top 3 or 4 things that they come to you and you have good discussions around, whether that's your boys and your husband?
Yeah, I think mental health is a big one. I think gender is another really big one. So I think they're 2 issues that seem to be coming out in their workplaces as well, and how that's handled as far as policy goes, sport decisions around policy, because both of my boys play quite high-level sport at times. So, yeah, they're issues probably from a political level, also in their work-life level, but also around social media that come out. And then also in relationships, because they're at a stage in their life where their romantic sort of interests are starting to become more serious as well. And what do women want from men anymore?
How do you create that balance, and how do you create those open conversations when there's such diversity in terms of how those things are discussed, or, where the boundaries are of those conversations? How do you navigate that?
I just take gender off the table.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
It's just as simple as that. You've got a brain, I've got a brain, let's go at it, and
Good. That's great. That's great.
the way I do it. Yeah. Don't speak down to me, I won't speak down to you.
Yeah. I like that.
And yeah.
You are well known in the parenting space, Michelle. So let's kind of, I don't know, backtrack, forward track. I'm not sure. Let me just take this in a different direction. So we're talking about some of the struggles that men are facing, and we've talked about the fact that I suppose in the last sort of 10 to 20 years, the role of men and manhood and how they're viewed and all that stuff, it's changed radically, and naturally that's going to then affect how we show up as parents. So let's kind of maybe start there and go for the dads, because this is your space, the parenting space. When you look at dads in 2024, what do you think some of their biggest challenges are in the parenting space?
I have never seen so many dads come to my parent nights. I've got 500 parents tomorrow night at St. Lawrence in Brisbane, and my guess is maybe a quarter to a third will be dads. 10 years ago, I might have had 2 or 3 dads in an audience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the difference. There was not many dads. And afterwards, there will be more dads lining up to ask me one-on-one questions, or just as many as mums. And there is something about dads at the moment that are deeply connected and almost worried about their kids. But when they ask me questions, they're also asking questions about, am I showing up for my kids? Am I doing okay?
Wow.
It's really intense. And it's stories like my kid's touching my $2,000 bike in the garage and it's driving me nuts, Michelle, and I lost the plot at him the other day because he left the light on my bike in the driveway and it could have gotten run over and I lost the plot and I had to, drive off down the road, and then I was so ashamed of my behavior that I didn't want to come home. And I think there's this real shame around dads sometimes when they get it wrong, but they're trying so hard. And I think what my message is for dads a lot of the time is, if you can get it right over 50% of the time, if you can aim for getting it right 60, 70% of the time, but the times that you get it wrong, if you can really repair well, I want you to know that that's good enough. Because I think in dads' hearts, they're so afraid of being like the dad that hurt them that it's almost flicking them the other way, that they kind of are paralyzed a little bit, or they don't know how to show compassion at the right time, so they get too hard. It's almost messing them up.
Well, I suppose when you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. And if we, again, backtrack the last 10, 20, 30 years, there's been more and more boys growing up without a father figure, right? Or a not so great father figure, right? So I suppose when you think about that, that makes so much sense to go, I'm fearful underneath all of that. There's a fear to go, am I going to repeat the cycle? Am I going to be what my dad was to me? And so I'm backwards in coming forwards, or like you said, I'm paralyzed because I'm not even sure, because I just don't want to get it wrong, and I don't want to screw my kids up because I feel screwed up from my father.
Yep. And the expectation, I think dads have to be really honest sometimes whether their expectations of their kids are realistic. I speak to so many dads and their expectations are not really realistic.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, exactly. The bike story is a perfect one.
Okay.
The dad would travel for work a lot. The bike was the funnest toy in the whole house. And that dad was expecting that kid not to touch the bike the whole time. That's not realistic, know? And I think as mums, we're just a little bit more in tune and a bit more realistic of where kids are developmentally. And I think dads sometimes they want their kids to be the best at something, or they want their kids to do really well, or they're expecting their kids sometimes to be consistent with their behavior. They just don't have maybe the same tuned in gauge of where their kids are developmentally. Before your kids come through the door, dads, you've got to scan them. Are they hungry? Are they tired? How was their day? Before you kind of expect something of them, go through a bit of a mental scan. Where are they emotionally at? And because sometimes dads are not great with tuning in with their own emotions, they're not therefore great at tuning in where their kids' emotions are at. And therefore, they're not got their expectations in the right place. And so when your expectations aren't in the right place, what happens then is you're expecting something a kid can't give you, and therefore that sets off a chain reaction where, therefore, you're expecting too high, then, kids disappoint, you get angry, you behave badly, it goes round and round. We've got a mess on our hands. So I think expectations are one place I think I'd really start with dads.
Okay. Let's maybe come back and unpack that. And also the fact that could lead us to anger as dads, which then can be another challenge that we can struggle with. We're talking with Michelle Mitchell. We're talking about compassionate dads on this week's Momentum. Thanks so much for tuning in, but we are going to take a short break and stay with us because we're going to continue this conversation with Michelle after the break here on Momentum. In the meantime, check out Michelle's website, michellemitchell.org, and have a look around the Momentum website, of course, momentumaustralia.org, and we'll be back with Michelle in just the tick.
This is Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
All right, it is part 2 of this week's show. Thanks so much for coming back and spending some time with us on Momentum. We've got our special guest, Michelle Mitchell, on this week's show with us, talking about compassionate dads. Michelle, let's just backtrack to the little last part of the show, the first part of the show that we just talked about, and that was, I suppose, this idea of expectations with dads. And I suppose when we unpack that a little bit, and let's do that, there's a tension with dads, for all of us as dads, right? To learn some of the stuff that we've had from our father that was good, to not repeat some of the stuff from our own dads that was not so great. And somewhere in the midst of that, then finding our own identity as a father and settling into that piece and going, okay, then who am I as a father? I've taken some of the good. I'm trying not to repeat some of the bad. I'm also a little bit about confused because this is a new space for me. I suppose let's step into that space. How did dads kind of find the balance between that tension of, I don't want to repeat, but I'm not really sure how to be a good dad yet, and it can be a little overwhelming, let's be honest.
Yeah, I think the light bulb moment comes when we realize parenting is actually all about just controlling what we can control. Our kids are not some kind of product of us. It's actually about controlling what we can control and coming to our kids as regulated as we can and thinking to ourselves, how do I want my kids to remember me, and trying to show up as that person most of the time.
That's absolutely true. There's people who have multiple dads influencing their world, right? So not just one. One could have been a violent dad, one could have been a loving dad, and so it's all over the place. So how do you manage that? And I think Tim's right. I mean, how do you find that balance, that middle road?
Even in a really practical way to think about this, even setting rules or boundaries for kids, that's actually not about controlling kids' behavior. That's actually about teaching kids what's right.
Yeah.
You can't control anything when it comes to parenting. We have to focus on us. That's the only thing that we can control. And that's actually a really powerful shift as parents. Some really powerful things that I think that we can focus on as parents are things like, I'd love to be remembered as a parent that just accepted my child for who they were, not who I wanted them to be. And this comes back to the expectations piece. I think a lot of dads think if I push my child, then I'm being a good dad, because that's sort of like how my dad did it for me. And, there were some parts of that worked. And maybe if I'm that dad, I would want to be remembered as someone who assured my child of physical and emotional safety. That's powerful. I would like to be remembered as a stable parent who was able to conduct business even through difficult times. I love that. I would want to be remembered as a dad who gave my kids the opportunity to make things right when they stuffed up and held them accountable. I think that's powerful.
That's huge.
I would want to be remembered as a dad who was able to model compassion and a full spectrum of emotion. I think all of those things could be things that would resonate with our listeners and for different reasons for different people.
Yeah.
But I think if we have that kind of understanding of who we want to be for our kids and we really lean into that, that's powerful.
That talks into the identity of the dad, and what he wants out of life. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with lots of those key things around identity.
I'm going to share a story, if you don't mind, because I think this might lead us to where we're going to go. And this is from my own experience when my daughter was young. I think there was this pressure, and I think it was probably from myself more than external, to be a perfect dad, to look like when I was out that I was a good person, that I was handling things well. And, we talked about the expectation piece, and often there would be a frustration then for me, and it actually had very little to do with my daughter. It was actually more about what her behavior made me feel, said about me, exactly, right? What her behavior then meant who the sort of person I was as a parent, what sort of dad that made. If she was acting a certain way, what did that say about me as a parent, right? And that then for me was the kind of the undoing, because then I would get, the expectation gets so high, and then when it doesn't get met, we can get frustrated, we can get angry. And that's kind of where I wanted to go, because I think a lot of men in general are afraid of expressing anger, afraid of their anger even, afraid of that part of them, which, I mean, let's be all honest, we all have from time to time. But even expressing that in a healthy way, we don't know what that looks like. We're afraid to express that in front of our wife and kids, or how do we even express that when we have those moments of frustration as a parent and, you know, perhaps tipping into the anger piece? How do we do that? Because again, then that means that, oh, then I must be a terrible person, or, you know, then that must mean I'm toxic, or I'm whatever it may be. So, or
be seen as, yeah.
Or seen as. So can we unpack that space, Michelle? Because let's be honest. I mean, that I think the facade thing for a man, and this means if I handle this well and my child behaves as, then that must mean I'm a good person and a good dad. And yet that can unravel very quickly.
I was at a parent night with maybe only like 60 parents last year. And I asked these parents of teenagers, how do they feel when their kids really stuff up? And this dad answered first. And he just yelled out, I feel like a failure. Wow. And from that point, and it was just this just river of statements just like that. And they're big words. I failed as a person. Like, I mean, these parents are unpacking this stuff, but the most volatile, deepest words came from dads. And I can only ask you two guys, why is it? I mean, I feel like dads carry the weight and the responsibility when their girl sends a nude, when their son, you know, takes drugs. There is something in the heart of dads when I have sat with dads that they feel like it is their fault, that even if they are not the one who has done something wrong, that somehow they are to blame. And there is a blame, a defensiveness, we'll bring that word back in. I know that was our last episode, but then an internalized anger that they have sometimes not learnt to deal with very well. And it comes with a shame that is so intense. Yeah. And guys either do one of two things. They dump it on everyone around them, or they retreat and they dump it on themselves. It's heavy for you guys.
Yep.
You know, women will get on the phone and they will talk it out. And they will go, I can't believe my daughter just did this. How dare she? And us women, we do see our kids as a product as us as well. I'm not saying we don't. But there's something about men that really internalize it in a very intense way.
In all fairness, right? I mean, you know, those of us who've had the journeys with our kids, and I've certainly had to do that with my kids, apologize at times and take responsibility. I think we can all on this call and listening say that's a good thing to do. What I am mindful of is that we are running out of time. So, Michelle, can I just bounce off the back of that and say that's one of the things that we would recommend, right? Not to be a perfect parent. You're never going to make that, you know, you're never going to make that happen. But what you can do is apologize and take responsibility for when you blow it as a parent. That's a good thing. But Michelle, quickly, some final thoughts, maybe 2 or 3 things that dads can take away from this conversation to go, what other things can we be mindful of as dads in our parenting role? You know, that will really benefit our kids?
I think probably one is authenticity will trump parenting strategies any day of the week. So if you are authentic with your kids, don't worry about using the right language or getting it perfect. That will be the best thing you can always do for your kids. You are the center of their world, but think about what it feels like to orbit around you and your energy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. So take responsibility for that anger energy. So what does it feel like to orbit around that energy in your home? So maybe that's number 2. Okay. And number 3 is if you want your kids to take responsibility when they mess up and you want to give them the opportunities to do that, how are you modeling that? And the best way to model that is fast and furious. Don't delay it too long. Kids have a really, they have a short attention span. And if you say sorry quickly, they correlate that very quickly to the action. But just take ownership really, really quickly. Kids are very, very moldable, but they'll go, you know what? I can work with that.
Mm.
You only need to get it right, 50, 60, 70% of the time. That's consistent enough.
Mm.
Do that well, it's good enough.
That's good. The second one I'm just going to finish on because I think that generically is a huge awareness piece for men. How are you showing up? What's your energy that you bring to not just your kids and your home, to your marriage, to your friends, to your work, to your church, to your ministry, to your sporting group? Like, what do people get when they get you? And that's a huge, that right itself is a mic drop and let's just stop on that for a moment. But let's think about that, leave that with you as we wrap up this week's show. It's been Compassionate Dads with Michelle Mitchell. What another amazing conversation. Would love you to check out Michelle's website. There is a whole bunch of stuff on there about parenting that you can glean from. michellemitchell.org. We'll try and tag some of that onto the MomentumAustralia.org website as well. You can certainly find this show and, of course, lots of resources on the website to help you on your journey. And if you need to, as a result of this conversation, have a safe conversation with someone on the care line, 1-800-000-636 is the number to call. Michelle, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show once again. Thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to MomentumAustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at MomentumAustralia.org. Until next time, keep moving forward with Momentum.